It's been about 12 hours since we put this on, and it's definitely dried till it's tack free. So we're gonna go ahead and put the second bottom patch on here. But before we do, there's a couple of housekeeping things that we need to do. Because this has only been 12 hours, it's still a little bit gooey because it's getting pretty chilly up here in the Northeast. So we're still not gooey, but we're still kind of soft, right? And I will tell you that once this gets fully hard, this stuff is sharp. I mean, it'll cut you in a heartbeat. So we want to take care of all that before we do any more work on the boat, right? So it's easy enough to do once it's in this state. And whether it's, you know, hard or just like this, it's the same procedure. You just got to take a razor knife and very carefully run down the sharp edge. Get that all off of there. All right, if you're going to be filling these up with bungs, which I assume most of you are, you want to be careful around those holes so that you don't gouge them out. So right now, again, I'm just trying to get all the potential splinters off of here that I can. Resist the urge to run your fingers down it, because that will not end well for you. Okay, so once you get it that far, then I just take a Sureform, a little rasp, and I go right down the edges. And don't worry about these frayed ends here, because we're going to be sanding all this down and varnishing and everything else, so we're not overly concerned about that. Right now we're just trying to keep ourselves from getting one of those god-awful fiberglass splinters. Good. All right, now I'm going to do the same thing. If you look down here along the bottom edge of the boat, I got the same thing, right, with the glass that was overhanging. So I'm going to go do the exact same thing. And again, this is also that when you grab it, you don't get a splinter in your hand. Okay, short of that, this fiberglass came out really, really nice. It's nice, even, not too much, not too little, pretty much perfect. And you can hear when I scrape my fingers, that's the contour of the cloth, the roughness of the cloth. And that's just the way I like to do it. I don't like to have too much in there, because now it's perfectly even and I don't have any runs, any pools or anything like that. So when I go back and do my filler coats, it's just going to make, when I go to do my final sanding just before I do my varnishing, it's just going to make life a whole lot easier, and the job's going to come out a whole lot better if I do this part neat. Now there was one small area, which is right here, and when you get up close you'll be able to see that. And it's a little air pocket, a little bubble, and there's a reason for that. As I push down on it, I can actually feel that there was a gap in the wood underneath that, right? We missed it. When we were sanding and everything looked good, we missed that little tiny little pocket down there. Now, we didn't see it when we were putting the fiberglass cloth on, because quite frankly, the resin was filling it up. But as the resin started to cure and it got warmer and warmer, it pushed up away from the cloth, which left that little tiny air pocket there. Okay, a couple of ways to deal with that. And first off, let's say you do want to deal with that. All right, so I'm going to be putting this layer on, which is another layer on the bottom of the boat. So I'm going to just cut this right out with this razor knife, and then we're going to put that cloth over the top, and nobody will ever know it was there. And so just take a nice sharp blade and dig it out. All right, so now that I've got that cut out, I just need to be cognizant of the fact that it's there when I put my other layer over the top. So if I wasn't putting the other layer over the top, I'd be cutting a tiny little patch, sticking it right on there. And then, you know, as we ferre all this out and do our filler coats over the top, it would just completely disappear. I'm not going to do that because I'm putting a big piece across there, right? So I just need to make sure that before I do anything, I make sure that I put plenty of epoxy resin in there so it's not going to go anywhere. Now, the good news is the wood is sealed at this point underneath, so it's not going to get sucked down inside of it, so it'll make it a lot easier for me to make that disappear. All right, well, let me get rid of the rest of these sharp corners here, and then we'll go ahead and put that bottom piece on. All right, now there's going to be a lot of people who are going to omit this next step. I just know from years of experience that, particularly in kayaks, people tend to get up really close to shore and pretty much beach them before they get in and out. It's a lot more difficult getting in and out of a kayak than it is getting out of a canoe. So people tend to do it in, ankle deep water. Well, what that does is it causes a lot of abrasion and stress on the bottom. So I like to put an extra layer, and I'll do the same thing on the inside. I'll put a strip down the middle on the inside, and I got this on the outside, and that gives me that just little bit of extra comfort there. Okay, now, last thing I'll tell you is if you allow, I told you this has only been 12 hours since we put this top coat on here, and so it's far from being cured. It's probably 3 or 4 days from being cured at this temperature. But if yours has cured, if you put this on, it's been a week or more and it's cured, there's a couple of ways that epoxy makes a bond, right? It's chemical and mechanical. Well, if it's fully cured, you've pretty much lost the opportunity for any chemical bond at that point. So you have to maximize the opportunity to get a mechanical bond. And what that means is you're going to get some 80 grit paper and lightly scuff it up. Don't dig down, don't sand into it, just scuff it up. Make sure that it's good and rough. And then when you put this on, it has the best chance for adhesion. But if you can, my recommendation is if you can, make sure you do it within a couple of days, and then you don't have any of that to worry about. Now we used, and again, I get cautious talking about too many details with epoxy because there are so many on the market. So let me caveat this with saying, this is the epoxy that we use and we ship and we sell, right? We use non-blushing epoxy. And in our world, that means there is no next step that I need to do this. Now, there are blushing epoxy systems out there like West System and so forth, as of the time of this filming, where there are steps in between you have to do. You have to clean it off because it gets this waxy buildup, and that waxy buildup with this will cause this to delaminate over time, all right? The stuff that I'm using, I'm not doing that here because the stuff that I'm using does not blush. So I don't have any of those problems. There is no waxy buildup or buildup of any kind, so I'm just gonna go ahead and epoxy right over the top of this thing. Okay, I'm gonna do that right now. So there's nothing particularly special to tell you about putting this layer on. It's pretty much the same that we did last time, although you're gonna see that the epoxy goes further because it's not being sucked up by the wood. So don't overmix. And just put it down. All right, well, I got my bottom layer on, and you got to be careful of the pulls on the cloth. It's kind of like a Pandora's box. Once you stop pulling on them, all kinds of bad things come out. So if it's something that's easy, if you get a little clump and you can pull it up, that's great. If you have a pair of scissors you're not worried about, then you can go ahead and cut wet cloth. That's not a problem. Or, and this is a touch thing, if after you put this on, rather than pre-cutting it the way I did, if after you put it on, you can take a brand new sharp razor knife and just cut your pattern, and as long as you cut in the wet area, it'll pull right off. Now, I give you a cautionary tale because if you cut too deep, you're going to cut through the cloth that's already there, All right, so it's kind of a touch thing, and that's hard for me to show you on a DVD. But you can make sure the blade is very, very sharp, brand spanking new. And if you cut along there very lightly, you should be able to pull it up. And if you've got little, you know, where it didn't cut, just take a little pair of scissors and snip it right along the way. Now these, what I've got here is pretty much no pulls, and I'm happy with the way this looks. There is some little hairs or frays going down the edges there, but again, by the time I roll on my filler coat and do my sanding, that's all just going to completely disappear into the background. You'll never see it. So I'm not going to fuss with it. And unless there's something easy to pick up like that one, I'm going to leave, you know, the stuff standing up along the edge. Once this is hard, you know, I can just give it a quick little sanding and it'll come right off. So I'm not going to worry about that. And there you go. I got my 2 layers on the bottom, my single layers on the side, and this is pretty much exactly how I wanted it to turn out, so I'm a happy guy. So before you run away from the boat, spend a little time gently going over it, making sure you don't have any drips and runs, and that'll really pay off in the final finish of the boat.